Hi, this is Chris.
Hi, it's Kevin.
We're rolling today. We're gonna just get right into it. Should we start right off? I'm gonna talk about John DeLyn's podcast yesterday. Is the Mormon Church in decline? But we'll get to that after. First, we're just gonna do a reaction video to something we haven't seen yet. It's
I kind of have watched it, but
you did?
yeah, but you haven't. And
Okay.
it was like just a half watch. I was kind of like preoccupied a little bit when I watched it, but
This is Cwic. Just dropped a video. I guess they're a bunch of different. What are they? They're
different professors at BYU.
different professors, and now they all teach online. So I guess you can record your professors. A while back,
They got Brad Wilcoxed.
uh, well, yeah, a while back, there was this whole channel called like "Film Your Marxist Professor."
Yeah, that's right.
They'd show a bunch of stuff that people were like putting out that was bonko. But we're just gonna react to this in largely real time. Kevin said he's watched already some of it. Should I put it on a little faster speed, or should we do it normal speed?
Just maybe a hair.
Just a hair.
Yeah, because it kind of jumps from clip to clip. So
Okay.
You have a gospel connection with many of your family members, right? And you can help them reframe the way they think about Christ by you sharing.
Is he holding Emer Max Candy there?
yes, he is.
Oh my goodness. As much as I dislike CRT and all that stuff, I mean, Kendi's not technically CRT stuff.
Right.
He's a little bit outside of it, although he completely is trained in the world of CRT and all that crap, like he says, and that he views so many people from CRT as his mentors. I don't
He's
know.
like next generation, though. It's like,
Well, they just call it like Kendyism or something like
Right.
that. But I've got a video that kind of shows the overlap. Not a video, a meme that kind of shows the overlap of those. But CRT people, I'll say this straight up. CRT is dumb. The people who invented it and came up with it and wrote it all out are smart. They're smart people. They're smart people the way they finagled it and put it together and mixed it around and saw angles and obviously had done their postmodern reading, obviously had done their critical theory reading, obviously had done even readings beyond that, knew law, had law degrees. Candy is dumb. He's dumb as a brick. That's that. Even Jonathan McCorder, not even Jonathan McCorder. I'd turn to him first, but if you watch the whole entire saga of Glenn Lowry and Jonathan McCorder trying to get Kendi to speak with them or have interactions with them that beyond just like twittering at each other back and forth. I guess that's called tweeting. Jonathan McCorder points out that Kendi is just not the sharpest tool in the shed. The stuff he talks about and does is, well, I don't think that book, they talk about like all this stuff is college level stuff, CRT's college level. Kendi should not be college level. He's not college level smart. That stuff's not even college 101 smart.
Your testimony about how you think about Christ.
A poet, and he is a preacher, and he is a prophet in the broader historical sense. A prophet as one who helps the status quo realize its shortcomings and hopefully strive to be something better. So we have poet, preacher, and prophet, Professor Willie Jennings. We'll turn the time to you now, sir.
And that image is of a white, self-sufficient man who embodies what I call 3 demonic virtues: possession, control, and mastery.
We can never forget.
Who is that?
That was the Willie Jennings, the one that the previous guy introduced.
Patrice Cullors. Do you know who that is?
Oh yeah, I know who Patrice Cullors is.
Black Lives Matter.
She's on the run. She
Cool,
moved to
horse
Switzerland,
crap.
didn't she?
Yeah. She's one of the ones who's defrauded Black Lives Matter for millions of dollars and
She had
allegedly.
7 houses.
Yeah.
Built one up to Pega Canyon.
Those are the founders.
close
This
to Malibu.
lady, that they're on all sorts of different shows. People probably know it already by this point, announcing that they're trained Marxists. But none of critical race theory is Marxism.
Yeah, that actually gets quoted by a BYU professor here coming up. By the way,
That it's not Marxism, or
that it's that he Mott and Bailey's it.
no.
So
Get these educated women, Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi, who are the founders of Black Lives Matter and the women who started this movement that has gone worldwide and has reshaped many things in our society.
Reshape people's wallets
yeah.
for doing nothing, for doing absolutely nothing for anybody except for making them richer.
Yep.
Great radical Ambalavana Sivanandan spoke scathingly in the 1980s of the racism awareness training events that became popular at that time, which he said, and I quote, removed state and institutional responsibility for racism, instead turning it into a natural social phenomenon independent of material conditions.
It's got to stay focused on the state. If it's not focused on the state or the system, how can you get any money?
Mm-hmm.
Can't get any money if it's not focused on the state and the system.
Gotta have a laundering mechanism.
Yeah.
That's
White
infallible.
disease.
In 2016, Dr. Wu won the John Hope Franklin Prize for Best Article on Race, Racism, and the Law.
This person's or who's talking? Jacob, Department of Sociology, Global Women's Studies.
And the Kimberly Crenshaw Outstanding Article Award.
Kimberly Crenshaw, the OG, critical race theorist.
Honorable mention.
And today I want to invite you to reflect with me around the themes of my book, After Whiteness.
Willie James Jennings, I feel like I know the name. I feel like I know the name. I feel like I do. Come on, brain. Come on, brain. Come on, brain. Oh.
And education in belonging. After Whiteness and education in belonging.
This smile is Duper's delight. Like a Duper's delight smile. Like you know that you are just getting over on these idiots who are sucking up your stuff.
There's an education.
Let's look at Duper's delight. Duper's delight. I got you, stupids.
In belonging.
But they're not the end in themselves. This is not how change happens. They have to translate into political action, into power and policy change in order to be successful. And I think that's a really important message from Kendi's book.
More non-college college.
Your tithing dollars at work.
As we consider how we, according to President Worthen's directive, can put the resources of the university and ourselves into the work of anti-racism, and that it's not a flash in the pan, and that activism is not these big events. And
what's the work of anti-racism? Repent forever, daily, forever, every day, forever. Can you get there? No, you cannot get there.
Nope.
And change makers are not those, not accidental activists.
In the kinds of
This is the most religious I've ever seen BYU.
Hey, we got to cover that last guy.
It's like original sin wasn't a part of Mormonism. One of the big things that they could like cheer about. They could cheer about is like, we don't have that religious, the original sin bull crap in this. And now we do.
Mm-hmm.
Questions, and some of them seem to be around critical race theories. And so I was just wondering if you could talk about what differences you see in terms of the way race is or is not part of public discourse, public concern in Europe in particular, I guess, which is the questions we've had here as opposed to the United States or even your own Australia.
Yeah, that's a really important question, given the attacks on critical race and decolonial thought in France and elsewhere, I might add. UK, for example, very much picking up the Trumpist mantle of going against critical race theory. And I think this is becoming a global phenomenon that I think we have to be really, really wary of.
So going against CRT's Trumpism then.
Yeah, and that's what they've changed it into, because they say that, hey, this was picked up by the GOP as an argument. But one of the people who've been onto this since forever, since a long time ago, it ultimately started in liberals, true liberals, picking it up and telling people about it. But from the start, we've been saying there's going to be a backlash. There's going to be, that's half of what the warning's been the whole entire time. There's going to be a backlash, and their backlash is going to be grounded in something sensible. Like, you gave them a sensible thing to unite themselves around.
Yep.
the books on Black theology, right? If you're interested on
Black theology, liberation theology, right? Black theology. Why should Black people be okay with that? Their theology now gets completely into Marxist theology. I saw this other guy on Sitch and Adams show covered it this Sunday, because there's this whole rift inside of BreadTube which is the leftist YouTube channels.
Mhm.
They're all fighting right now because this guy named FD signifier, that's a Derridian term, or well, he's obviously referring to it because he's talking about structuralist ideas. But that guy comes in and points out and says, all you people reading from colleges who are reading, Marx to Engels to whoever, this is still white European. Marxism is still white European.
Right. Yeah. It's problematic.
Yeah. But if I were a black person, I would be pissed that you're saying that my theology is somehow intrinsically married to Marxism.
Find information on how to get to that in Kendi's book. We need to root ourselves in love.
I keep thinking they're talking about like the higher theorists, and they keep saying Kendi, and my eyes go crossed. Yeah.
And then try to connect people to, I would say, Jesus Christ, especially those that are within our family. And this will be the last thing I'll say. It comes from Kendi's book on page 15 in Definitions. He talks about a way of reframing about how we think about Jesus Christ that was provided by Tom Skinner. So Tom, he was a preacher from Harlem, and he says,
this liberation theology stuff it's only been brought up by Glenn Beck, who's trying to scaremonger people into thinking that it's
Jesus was a radical revolutionary.
Who's also a part of my religion.
Yeah. Jesus was a radical revolutionary. Yeah. He's totally all about the socialism, huh?
With hair on.
Oh, but anybody reads into scripture, their political worldviews, they're just terrible. But you guys do it, and it's academics. We are academics.
On his chest,
look at
and dirt under his fingernails. Any gospel that does not speak to the issue of enslavement and injustice and inequality, any gospel that does not want to go where people are hungry and poverty-stricken and set them free in the name of Jesus Christ is not the gospel.
Thanks, Kendi. Wow, this Kendi sounds like a prophet.
Yeah, he just wrote some scripture.
Gospel connection with many of your family members, right? And you can help them reframe the way they think about Christ by you sharing your testimony about how you think.
Rethink, reimagine. You can reimagine Christ. You can reimagine him to be something like, well, I don't know, Che Guevara. Or like, if we could all reimagine Christ like Castro Christ. Well, right now that's kind of hard because Trudeau's seeming so Castro, and everybody knows that he's probably Castro's kid anyway. And Trudeau's so Christ that I don't want to liken Christ to Trudeau because that'd be blasphemous.
Jehu or already.
There's not a white self-sufficient masculinist prep that always tries to exhibit possession, control, and mastery.
I owe my respect to folks from the Black Panther Party for their development of social programs that have helped to alleviate food insecurity in our nation for years.
The Black Panther Party.
I think she was reading that.
Especially the critical race scholar and Aboriginal woman, Debbie Bargali, with whom I'm working on sort of developing.
So race is a social construct. Under what circumstances is race socially constructed? Social constructions do not have anything to say about race that is not already said by the biological discourses. Social constructivism is a conservative goldmine. What? What racial literacy is not? What racial literacy could be? What are these?
I don't know.
The current terms.
We don't have full context in this one, but
Audre Lorde, the tools of the master are not sufficient to bring down the master's house. That's such a dumb phrase because obviously, like, you're a construction guy. I think you could use your tools to destroy your own house, but we have foreclosed the possibility of theorizing how racialization works. This is all sophistry and beyond sophistry.
Mm-hmm.
If people keep wanting to say like that's a college level theory, well, maybe college level has gotten down to junior high level now and has been for a while.
A project on what we actually mean when we say racial literacy and why we need it, what it is and what it isn't, and what it could look like in the future, going towards the dismantling of the racial state of so-called Australia.
We know that some.
This is BYU.
I'm surprised more professors haven't dyed their hair blue down at BYU.
Some of the
They're not allowed to, right?
dominant hegemonic features of our culture.
There's all those Gramscian words.
We know that some of the dominant hegemonic features of our culture in terms of gender and race, they're nationwide.
Oh, what? Dominant hegemonic discourses are nationwide. You're doing your Foucault stuff. It's right down to your inner soul. It penetrates through you. It's fractal. It's in your books behind you. It's in your walls. It's in between your fingernails, dude. Goes nationally. Come on, guy. It's way further than that. Read harder.
It's a very suburban population, LDS population. So you see this. You see a pattern of majority Republican, conservative-leaning vote in state after state. That's not different.
See, this is case in point though, like where there was always the joke, like that Utah was always 2 years, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years behind, like say California or something, you know, around. Like I'd see these guys and I'm like, they're kind of late to the party. They're still dressed like they were just off the mission and all that stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And it just also reminds me of Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a founding scholar of intersectionality, describing, I caught her on the radio.
Intersectionality is not critical race theory. I've had somebody try to argue that. That's the reason why you even like parse those things out, is because people have tried to dodge out of those things when you go pointing to situations that are ideas from intersectionality or ideas from Kendi getting into K through 12 schools, and they're very obviously there, and they try to duck dive out of them and say, that's not technically critical race theory, that's technically intersectionality. Made up by the same person under a critical race theory banner, who she herself said that she finds it useful to put all of them under the umbrella of critical race theory. I can pull that up too. That she's got it in her own writing, and not only that, she brags about having moved the stuff into the lower schooling program herself.
Describing how critical race theory is just a tool to try to understand what's happening so that we can do better.
Always in the name of doing better.
Better is one of those good things, right? If we get the better doing happening, we'll be doing better finally. But there's no getting there. We'll never be good. We'll only be in the process of doing better.
That's right.
But then we'll have to do better. Do better.
Of self-sufficiency that showed up throughout the colonial world.
Dr. Alana Linton is an anti-racist, race-critical scholar who works on the critical theorization of race, racism, and anti-racism.
She's a money waster.
Dr. Linton just finished a term as the president of the Australian Critical Race and Whiteness Studies Association.
Critical race and critical whiteness are two different things. Robin DiAngelo's critical whiteness. So if you bring up Robin DiAngelo being used in K through 12 schools, that's not critical race theory schools. Gotcha.
But while a better historical and conceptual understanding of what race does is vital, increasing the public's understanding of race, I think, be accompanied by a radical reorganization of a society in ways that undo current arrangements of exploitation that maintain and deepen white supremacy.
As a parent, I would encourage you to seriously question these distinctions. Know that play prepares children for life, and children need broad options. Toys are the means by which they practice and acquire the most fundamental motor, cognitive, spatial, social, and emotional skills. But that needed variety is lost when the adults in corporate worlds define some toys as for boys and others as for girls. Provide your children.
Oh gosh, it's such a
so
problem.
Boys should play with Barbies. I did see some stuff that was written down there talking about that. Probably this guy's class.
It's been such a terrible problem since forever. I remember when I was a kid, play over at my neighbor's house and they had a playroom. We're down in my basement and there's a playroom. And all the toys were just jumbled out, just like this. Parents standing there at all times, making sure that we only played with the right toys. That's how it always was, man. Just them enforcing their categories on us.
Even if you did pick up the Barbie back then,
it's already. I did. I played with Barbies.
Sure I did.
They'd be part of my narrative. I'd have like a whole thing going, just like the kid in Toy Story did.
See, like our parents would walk in, and we'd be playing with there'd be monster trucks and stuff like that, you know, and then on Hot Wheels, and then there's a Barbie. I pick up Barbie, play with, I don't know, hang out with it for 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden, you know, parents are like, whatever. Nowadays, it's like that happens, and you walk in, and you're like, oh, we better sign our kid up for hormone blockers now. I'll call the doctor.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, even back then, and one of the issues nowadays, I've heard people talk about this, is they never give kids time to have unsupervised play. That's actually one of Jonathan Haidt's big deals too. But we were completely unsupervised when we were little. They just let us play for hours in basements and rooms like this. on our own. If we wanted to play with the girls' toys, we could play with the girls' toys. If they wanted to play with the boys' toys, they could play with the boys' toys. There was nobody cutting off the categories there.
Yep.
Children with a range of toys and activities that promote all types of developmental skills, and especially be mindful of the language you use in your home that may convey gendered meanings around their play and their toys. Remember the hot potato effect.
We know that
Be very careful about it because it's the biggest deal in the world.
the Black Lives Matter and its movement, and especially in terms of Black women like Melody Jackson, Janisha Demise Williams, and many others, led the way. This is way back in 2017 when people were, it seems very quaint now, arguing about somebody kneeling and peacefully protesting Colin Kaepernick.
Colin Kaepernick, the most oppressed person, the most oppressed 100 millionaire in history. It feels like slavery, man. It's slavery.
Last thing I'll say about this sign, this example is, I think there's a fairly good chance that before the vandalism, it was unlikely these.
They were racist. On structural inheritance of the past as implicated subjects, Rothberg writes, implicated subjects. We live enmeshed in structures, systems, man, institutions, man, in webs of structures of systems of structures and systemic systems of systems, which are the products of
it's systems, not people.
Which are the products of history. And if we can see them play out dialectically, we are implicated in them in the sense that they cause us. That's so Marxist. And that's one of those things that you have to know Marxism to know that that's just pure Marxism. But if you point out to somebody that's Marxism, he calls everything Marxism. That is Marxism. That's Marxist historicism. That's how they talk about history, and that's how they talk about how history plays out in dialectic. Implication derives, especially from a structural position in relation to groups. Structural determinism is Marxism again. From a structural position in relation to groups, classes, and modes of production, and makes some people's beneficiaries of history. This is Marxism. This is just a clip of Marxism, but we're just not going to put the word Marx there for it. Some people beneficiaries of history.
You know, that's right. Groups, classes, and well.
Yeah, they add some groups in there.
They add,
Marx,
you know,
just
modes of production. Original OG Marxism.
Yeah, not their own, and disadvantages others regardless of genealogical connection to the past. We are structurally implicated subjects, structural determinism, and our implications concerns the way deeds of the past shape relations to the present. So deep, man.
Ladies would have stopped to read the sign, to reflect on it, to contemplate its meaning.
It's art. It's art, man. Modern art.
But because it is further...
Is that at BYU, whatever that statue is?
I am not sure.
By the work of anti-racists.
So how do we talk?
Why did they just mention that those old guys were racist? I mean, they also probably weren't down with gender theory. Why don't we mark that on their statues too?
Talk to our kids about gender. I'm convinced that one of the most effective tools at our disposal, especially for parents of daughters, is feminism.
You know, Rosa Parks, somebody like Rosa Parks, who we think of,
especially for parents of daughters.
Identify harmful stereotypes, recognize instances of discrimination, conjure adaptive responses to sexism, cope more effectively with prejudice.
Is feminism.
You know, Rosa Parks, somebody like Rosa Parks, who we think of as this, you know, really important figure in the civil rights movement. She wasn't an accidental activist. She was trained.
Dealing with it directly.
That's true. That's actually brought up in an NPR. NPR had a podcast called More Perfect, and it's about a more perfect union. And it goes into detail about how instances like Rosa Parks were set up. Like the police officers who arrested her were helping make the extant case. They were there with them in a PR mode to take a picture of them. In fact, even in the Rosa Parks scenario, there was another lady, and then they selected Rosa Parks because she was a better appearing person for the PR lady. Although I'm going to mention that I might be going to Atlanta pretty soon, and I saw that there could be tour buses around the city to go check out like a civil rights tour. And Kevin said, "You'll probably have to sit at the back of the bus."
Yeah, you threw me under the bus now.
That's funny though.
I'm underneath the bus now.
Yeah, no doubt. We're already there, man.
Yeah.
It will be helpful. There's been a lot of pushback on critical race theory lately, with people arguing that it is dangerously divisive or anti-American. So what is critical race theory, and how does Kendi's book relate to it?
What's she going to say? Is she going to deny he's critical race theory, or she's going to say that he is?
I think she's going to deny the critical race theory. I think
she's going to say that he relates to it. Let's see.
with a critical eye, they've looked more closely at the foundation of this kind of maybe idea of liberalism.
So that's getting into that concept that I'm keep trying to say is people like Kara on Mormon Stories constantly brings up critical eye and critical consciousness, that they don't know that when these guys are talking about critical consciousness, critical theory, critical theorists, all the criticism was, are we critically conscious of capitalism? It has a direct line of what you're critically looking at. And so many people in the ex-Mormon world want to think that it's talking about the general concept of critical thinking. No, critical consciousness in Marxism is how can we be more critical of capitalism? And then in these new cultural Marxist ways, they turn it into the larger hegemonic idea of the white society in general, white as construct.
Which kind of presumes that there's an existence of a meritocracy and that we're actually living in that system, right? It's based on this ideals of equal opportunity, that individual merit determines your outcomes, that, you know, it's kind of competition on this equal playing field. And that's kind of the basis for what America is.
It's what it should be. Everybody agrees due to cronyism and other stupid ideas, like the stupid ideas that are getting pressed down on the very meritocratic Asians who are trying to get into Harvard, getting ousted for affirmative action reasons.
CRT's kind of pushback against that. And
gathering must be redeemed. It must be rescued. It must be rescued from the sick gathering that has formed because of whiteness.
This is something.
That's just pure. That guy is just pure preacher stuff. I don't know.
That is scary.
Christian nationalism measures 40% to 43% of AZ Utah LDS score high or are nationalists. Oh my goodness. I'm sure that their metrics or descriptions of nationalism are very, very agreeable.
That is something that should be taken seriously, and it's something that has infected a very large fraction of the white LDS population.
I'll just kind of piggyback on Dr. Hadfield's comments about, you know, critical race theory as one tool, and that there are lots of tools. And I think that we have some pretty powerful tools that have come from the church.
Sounds like she's skeptical. A couple times she's popped up. Is that what you're gathering?
She kind of comes across as like, am I saying it right? Am I saying it? You know,
this past conference made clear, if it wasn't already clear from what President Nelson and other general authorities have said over the last few years, that this type of work, the work of anti-racism, is a religious imperative. And they, a number of
anti-racism work is a religious imperative. Did they say it that way? I know Oaks had like to talk about it, but they didn't use Kendi's language.
President Nelson came out and said, you know, he did talk about rooting out racism, but it's like
they don't use Kendi's
they
language.
conflate it and get it like, oh, well, because he said that, then Kendi's you know, right on the same page.
Yeah.
Of the brethren and female leaders of the church offered you know, some ideas that really fit, I think, really well with what Kendi's saying.
Some people that push back view it as a kind of a Marxist postmodern
because it is
ideology, and that it's
because it is. Because it says it is.
Yeah, see, this is where I was telling you. Keep going.
Philosophy.
Some people view it as what it says it is.
Yeah.
That separates rather than unifies, which kind of gets to Leslie's question. You know, they view it as Marxist because instead of the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, the owners and the workers, those terms have been replaced by whites and non-whites. And that combines into a system of oppressor and oppressed. And some of the critiques border on the level of conspiracy.
Whoa, really?
So they kind of invoke Marxism and they give it a new term kind of called cultural Marxism, which comes from a Frankfurt school. Cultural Marxism has its own.
At least he admits that it came from them, like even the definition came from them.
Academic history and traditional theoretical approach. But since the 1990s, we've seen individuals kind of take this and turn it into a global conspiracy where the goal of cultural Marxism is to destroy Western values.
Like Gramsci.
They outright say it.
Like Gramsci and the Frankfurt Schoolers and Marcuse said was the intended idea of the system.
And traditions. So like capitalism, authority.
And he was just talking about critical consciousness against capitalism.
I would like him to define the idea of dismantling the patriarchy.
Morality, patriotism, liberalism.
It's also difficult to disentangle race from the modern capitalist system, and all capitalism, as Ruth Wilson Gilmore writes, is of course racial capitalism.
In terms of structural oppression and modernity. And of course, technologies, things like print capitalism, photography, these have all, and many others, these have all, of course, been part of that history and that those systems.
I read Dr.
Systems, capitalism, dismantle. Some people say it's a conspiracy theory that we're trying to do.
It's a global.
Kennedy's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, last year at the end of the summer, and I found it an enlightening experience.
And the first step that you can do.
One who is supporting a racist. Oh yeah, I hope this person's pointing out that this was ridiculous tautology, like a circular reasoning. Definition of a racist: one who supports racist policy through their actions of inaction or expressing a racist idea. Stop saying I'm not racist. People constantly change the definition of what's racist so it doesn't apply to them. The other people are changing the definition of racist. I'm not racist.
Is to stop saying, oh, I'm not racist, right?
Yes.
In fact, if you want to spot a racist, that's the first thing they'll do is they say, oh, I'm not racist.
That's the first thing I'll do right now. I'm not racist.
I'm not racist either.
To try to name what is known but rarely named, and that is the struggle over and the fight with the image of the white self-sufficient man, or more precisely, the struggle over white self-sufficient masculinist intellectual form.
Whoa, that's so deep. I'm melting. Racist.
Race is one of those major or master concepts, and he says the masculine form is deliberate.
We're living in the age of Black Lives Matter, which I have a firm commitment is today's civil rights movement.
Poor MLK, man.
So I'm going to write a direct check to Patrice Coolers for the amount of $2,500.
Draws our attention to these young girls who, of course, are too young to have sort of been alive, to have been alive in the context of the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement.
So we got to make sure that they're all up to speed on just how terrible they are for their identity. Complicit. Or complicit. Look at those walking machines of complicity.
Have probably, I would imagine, very little understanding of their genealogical relationship to slavery, but are nevertheless enmeshed in.
You didn't realize you were born into original sin.
Society and its structures and institutions and ideas, which are.
We live in a society.
The products of that history.
If we want to get to this new anti-racist BYU, these are.
We want to get there. We're gonna get there. There's a there.
Yep.
There's a there to get to.
Things that can get us there, right? So think about that kind of policy-oriented approach.
Policy. That's when you're hearing Kendi if the word policy is dropped.
To anti-racism.
Anti-racism.
We need to mandate it.
Individuals that fall back on this liberalism kind of frame race-based issues as in the language of liberalism so they can appear moral.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. It's a virtue signal.
Get on board with that kind of stuff. And you can take my word for it, or you can listen to my main man, Russ, here. My main man, Russ, is probably one of the strongest advocates for everything that I just said.
You're speaking for Russell, are you?
Mm.
I don't know if that's true or not, but he's speaking for him. But who knows? Maybe he's bought into all of it.
Whiteness is an engine of aspiration.
Race, deep.
If you aspire to anything in your life, you are complicit in whiteness.
Understanding of how it functions and how it continues to reproduce itself should be at the heart of how we approach all other topics.
Has become Black History Month. And this is specifically designed so that Black youth can have an opportunity to learn and think about their positive contributions to history and to highlight Black role models. Black power advocates from Marcus Garvey to Malcolm X, Angela Davis, and beyond.
Angela Davis. I think there's a lot redeemable about Malcolm X, for sure. The guy, towards the end of his life, changed around a lot.
I don't agree with everything, but he said some stuff that was for sure true.
Well, he changed around a whole lot towards the end of his life, too. He was rethinking a lot of stuff, and a lot of people think that's why the Nation of Islam killed him. Nope, it was the FBI. No, it was the Nation of Islam. Nope, it was the FBI.
You see, something must be given up. Or should I say, someone. That old man,
Daniel Dennett, one of the best things he ever invented was the term deepity. This guy is a walking deepity.
man, my friends, who is a master, who dreams his son in power.
That's why saying you're not racist isn't a virtue signal, because a virtue signal would be, oh, I'm not racist. This guy's really, really smart, and this guy's really, really great, and all that stuff. It's not a virtue signal. I'm not racist, and I can call this guy an idiot.
Dreams his son.
If I were a racist who got caught up in my head about that stuff, I'd have to like look at this guy and pretend like any of this means anything or that it has validity to it at all. The modern type of racist. And then if it was a past type of racist, you'd just say something about he's an idiot because of something, you know. But because I am not racist, and if he said smart stuff right now, I could say he's saying smart stuff. But because he's saying dumb stuff right now, I can say he's saying dumb stuff. And I can have a colorblind view of that. See how that works? It's not a virtue
but it's
signal.
problematic.
I'm not showing that I'm some nice guy. I'm showing that I'm a bit willing to be a dick and call him an idiot because I'm not racist.
Become the white self-sufficient man. He must die in us in order for another dream to take hold.
So the point here, of course, is that white ignorance is willful. It's not that it isn't true to say that there are individual white people who are not aware, and if they were made aware of race, that they wouldn't change their behavior or work toward anti-racism, but rather that the racial state requires this structural white ignorance.
Sometimes it takes years of effort and work to slowly move somebody into the right direction.
Oh, I'm starting. I'm starting. Just kidding. If anybody really like saw my whole entire journey with it, it was like you maybe had me listening and believing that you guys were good-willed in any way, shape, or form about 15 years ago. And then slowly but surely, I mean, I figured out a long time ago in the 2000s, 2007s, going to queer readings in the basements of Sam Weller and different types of things like that, and finding out really quickly that I wasn't there to be anything but dunked on as somebody who can't. I was showing up as an ally.
Going to those before.
James, you can ask my friend James and I. We went to a bunch of them. We went to for 6 months. We went to them and did all the readings and did all that sorts of stuff. And pretty quickly, we just learned that we were just there to find out that basically the same type of concept that we just can't understand. We don't know. And it was almost like they were angrier at people trying to be allies than they were at just straight open.
So you guys were just there to be punching bags.
Yeah, but I think anybody who's in it long enough, and then some people will just go right along with it. And like I couldn't tell you the amount of times that I've seen these types of activists go after people who I've seen as activists, like Lindsay Hansen Park or John Lynn, but then they respond by, yes, I will lash myself. I will lash myself, and just sit there and do all the lashes. I never did that. I always just from the very start. And I think Robin DiAngelo and Kendi works on people who feel like maybe they did have some racist ideas inside themselves. So it's like an admittance. I'm sorry. I know the inside of my brain. I know how I feel. I know I never once looked at a black guy in my life and thought, I think that black guy is probably something on the negative spectrum or something on the positive spectrum because he's black. Positive or negative. That's why it's not a virtue signal. I take them on just like I take any white guy I come across. Like if they start talking and they start saying stuff, they start acting stuff, or depending like maybe the job they're doing, I think they're cool. If they're being an idiot, I think they're an idiot. It's simple as that. And it's been that my whole way. And I know that I don't.
Dude, that's how it was in the 90s, man.
I know I don't
That's how it was
stack.
when we grew up.
I know I don't stack extra on top of that. I know I don't. And they're trying to tell me that I do and always have and just didn't realize I did and didn't. But I'm sorry. Like I know the inside of my head. I know it's always been that way. And you guys are the ones trying to put it into me. Flip makes the joke of like, you guys are against conversion therapy, right? You're trying to convert me into a racist. Please stop it. You know?
And especially with our family members, these people we want to be with eternally and we want to help in this life. It's valuable being gentle as we can, but at the same time being honest and real and true with them. We need to root ourselves in love and then try to connect people to, I would say, Jesus Christ, especially those that are within our family. And this will be the last thing I'll say. It comes from Kendi's book on page 15 in Definitions. He talks about a way of reframing about how we think about Jesus Christ.
In Kendi's book, where he says the answer to discrimination is more discrimination.
Yep.
That was provided by Tom Skinner. So Tom, he was a preacher from Harlem. And he says, Jesus was a radical revolutionary with hair on his chest and dirt under his fingernails. Any gospel that does not speak to the issue of enslavement and injustice and inequality, any gospel that does not want to go where people are hungry and poverty-stricken and set them free in the name of Jesus Christ is not the gospel.
The gospel is complete materialism, isn't it? It's all about this material life and what you're doing around here.
Yep.
So you have a gospel connection with many of your family members, right? And you can help them reframe the way they think about Christ by you sharing your testimony about how you think of
religion.
It's so funny, man. It's so funny to see this mixing of an MTC like vibe with Marxism.
Oh yeah,
it's lovely.
Once again, I'm a little dumber than I was before we pushed play.
And again, you're tithing dollars at work.
It's kind of a good. This is from the Woke Temple. He's got a bunch of little good screens like this that kind of try to help explain it out. The only reason they parse this stuff out, because I should pull it up just to prove it, but what the heck? I can prove it if anybody wants me to prove it. Crenshaw herself wrote that she thinks critical race theory is a good umbrella term for all this. And you could even write, they call this D'Angelism and Kendiism. There's critical whiteness studies. There's something called, what do they call it? They call it race studies or something, which is something that came before any of this stuff was around from like the 60s or 70s. Charles Miller, whatever the heck he was. They say it was a predecessor to critical race theory, but Crenshaw herself says critical race theory is a good umbrella term. So they have all this bull crap and they all overlap around these ideas of lived experiences, whiteness and white privilege, structural racism. What's different? I mean, there's more of a challenge to rationalism in critical race theory. I mean, that's probably Kendi's so not rational. I mean, I think it's a challenge to rationalism in itself, but he just doesn't talk about it in that middle way.
Not racist equals not possible.
So structural determinism, the reason that's different than structural racism is because it really, really uses the exact language out of Marx, just really swaps it out. Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw. And then, so one of the reasons that they separated, when some of the arguments came up that this was in K through 12 schools, they could find obvious examples where D'Angelo was in those schools or where Kendi was in those schools. And people would dodge out of those and say, that's not critical race theory, critical race theory doesn't say that to colleges.
We need to find out the net worth of Robin D'Angelo.
Yeah.
And
But then, both of them do, like for single afternoons of talking, will get like $40,000 from these school districts.
Yeah, I know.
Let alone what they made off their books, and let alone that Kendi received a $10 million grant from Twitter, and I'm sure tons more. But even the critical race theory, this is supposedly only taught in colleges. The concepts and ideas from it, as I said the other time, like nobody taught little kids the Civil Rights Act of 64. Nobody went through all the little torts of the Civil Rights Act of 64. Who were the people who passed it in government? Nobody ever once learned that. You learn the ideas of I have a dream. It's the same concept with this. These ideas are being taught at all levels. These ideas that it's bad to even think about that Martin Luther King colorblind liberalism approaches to dealing with race. I feel very much dumber, very, very much dumber.
Yep.
So that's BYU.
Yep.
BYU.
Did you ever think that would end up down there? I mean, you obviously studied it at BYU, but even then, did you ever think that stuff would be being taught down in BYU too?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. There was this thing going on Twitter saying that Christopher Rufo lies about critical race. Christopher Rufo he's part of some, what is he part of? The Manhattan Institute.
He goes out and talks about a lot of like wokeness and stuff like that, and kind of explains. He's kind of like a James Lindsay, but a little bit more conservative.
He's a reporter. He's more a reporter than James Lindsay. James Lindsay is the person who showed it. Christopher Rufo in like a year or two might switch to something else entirely because he's just reporting on stuff that's an issue. And he's the one who made it a big issue for conservatives, which we always knew was coming, just somebody had to pick up on it. But a bunch of people on Twitter started calling him a liar and a terrible person because he's saying all these things are critical race theory when they're not critical race theory. They're these different ideas. And then Christopher Rufo made a tweet saying, I think it's useful to put all these things under one single term like critical race theory, like put all of the Hydra head under one, call it the Hydra, so that we don't have to be beating around these little things of saying it's this and it's that. And so a bunch of people sent that tweet around that he just said openly that that's why he did that. That look at him being dishonest. He's calling all these things critical race theory that aren't critical race theory. But then he pulled this up. Well, if it isn't Kimberly Crenshaw, founder of critical race theory, telling us that the term critical race theory can be used as interchangeably for race scholarship as interchangeably for race scholarship as Kleenex is for one single tissue, was basically made up, fused together to mark a possibility. That's Ian Crenshaw's book, Critical Race Theory. That was a real depressing video. It's a BYU.
Yep.
Wonder what sociology, all of them, sociology. I don't know what departments for sure they are, but
yeah, I'm not sure.
So after we saw BYU acting like that, maybe we should be asking the question that John DeLynne's asking here. Is the Mormon church in decline? An insider report. Well, I guess we just sort of saw an insider report, but it's from one side of view. Because I think if DeLynne wanted to be more holistic about his approach of asking whether it's in decline or not, he should be asking whether or not such things make it seem in decline to people with conservative attitudes. Yet he just thinks the conservatives just run rampant with it, and they don't see the same concepts of these guys saying that Russell M. Nelson is tap dancing with a bunch of ideologies that are frustrating. Doesn't also become a concern for the conservative side. But no, it's just they don't even grasp that.
And it is, because it's something that I have a little bit of heartburn with, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
But I don't cast the baby out with the bathwater, though. Like, to me, first of all, for myself, I can separate the church from the gospel, if that makes sense. Like I can separate the church and the structure. These things that are taught down at BYU, they don't really have a whole lot to do with anything that I'm doing. I was never really a big BYU fan anyway, but my tithing money goes down there. But it's not going to stop me from practicing what I believe.
Due to accreditation and all that types of stuff, they have to play along with some of those games or let people in or start working on certain types of issues, especially in departments like sociology or psychology or who knows what. And there's a lot of people. I mean, I think that's why Jeffrey R. Holland made that whole entire Musket speech, is that they know that BYU as an NCAA accredited university, or whatever they call those other accreditations, because I think those are interdepartmental, like there's accreditations to prove that you're able to have a psychology department, that they know it's gotten away from them, and they can't make many choices about not having that crap in the current day super ideological university systems.
Right.
So these guys claim that they got an insider report from somebody in the same area as Brad Wilcox, that he has firsthand anecdotal knowledge about people's faith being challenged. And so they talk about that like, oh boy, it's great big news that the church is in decline for us. One of the things he says, I don't know if we'll hit it here, but he claims that this guy says most people going to church, well, I'd say 30 to 40% of them aren't literal believers. And that might be true or not, but sometimes these days, the people I see as not old school literal believers like I knew in the 90s, they're starting to become some of the strongest, most stringent members. If you ask me, like we're on one of those websites, some of those Latter-day Lobster guys, they're interpreting it in their own ways. And I don't see them as separating from it anytime soon. And they're not believing it in the old literal ways that I kind of assumed you had to believe it in my first 20 years of life. But
yeah,
because people aren't literal believers, that's not a sign that it's weakening. I'd say that some of that might be a sign in ways that it's strengthening.
And that is very much that crowd too. Do you know what I mean by that? Yeah. Like people who have their own kind of off-brand of Mormonism, where they sustain the leaders, but they still think that they have a certain connection with truth that the leadership does not access that they do.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that in just a second, because the
problem is that you think that that's a sign of decline. That stuff might be a sign of doubling down back into it.
I now just will always see them as Uncle, what's his name? Uncle, well, she's Janice, and his Uncle.
For sure. Or the name of the dragon that we used on it?
Yeah. His uncle.
I didn't even know what his name
Uncle
is.
Deadly.
Oh, really?
I think it's.
I never knew his name. He started popping up a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know why they thought like.
We were originally going to do one with Guy Smiley, but
Guy Smiley would be the perfect
but
one.
I couldn't find one. That one just worked perfect.
Well, Guy Smiley only ever really popped up in like a couple early Sesame.
Oh yeah,
Guy
I don't think
Smiley-
he ever did anything with Janice.
He's not a very common guy. In fact, Guy Smiley might be Sesame Street over Muppets. So
It was Sesame
He might
Street.
not technically overlap with Muppets unless there was a crossover. And in the crossover, they're not going to bring Guy Smiley. He's too white. He's too male. He's too successful. He's too patriarchal.
Success head. Yep.
Yeah.
Sure for that. But I'll just add to what you're saying, Kara.
Can I speed this one up? I can speed this one up. Right?
The church is really being split in two, because they have liberals and progressives and pro-LGBT people and pro-women and pro people of color on the one hand. It's pulling the church in one direction, and then you've got these prepper fundamentalist super conservatives pulling the church in another direction, and it's
I will grant that maybe he jumped over like categories there all the way to.
I was hoping he was going to say alt-right, but I guess he did say conservative.
I really do think that he ends up framing it that that's all the right. Here and there he'll stop and say, "But we want to say that this is an open space for our conservative friends too," even though every single description they give about it is just such a bonko-headed.
And if you're a Canadian member, you are now a terrorist.
It's got to be an excruciating task to try and stay centered and not lose both wings. So,
but you're simply worried or licking your chops that they're going to lose the left wing of that, and you don't lick your chops at all that they might lose the right wing of that.
Yeah. We can do away with the right wing.
Next slide. This continues.
Cognitive dissonance and angst among conservatives for the first time.
Use the conservative sort of commentary. Kara, do you want to continue?
Cognitive dissonance and angst among conservatives for the first time. Part two. I can't stress enough how big of a deal this has become. We had a high-ranking leader in our stake released because he was too pro-Trump on social media and believed in the QAnon stuff as well. The combination of anti-vaxxers, Julie Rowe-ites, preppers, and insane conspiracy theories, plus the church's relative moderation on those issues, has caused real schisms in wards and quite a bit of radicalism in wards amongst.
So even there, they can't like describe it, right? They can't describe that people, they don't just have to be QAnon people. People who think that the church is kowtowing too much to these certain movements are getting skeptical of the church themselves. They still just kind of frame it that they can't get it. They just don't get it.
Yeah. So this is just repeating kind of what we just talked about. Is there anything else you want to? I mean, the QAnon stuff is also significant because the QAnon conspiracy theory, it really reminds me of like Ezra Taft Benson, No Man Knows My History, John Birch Society.
QAnon's like
conservatism that that we brought on Matt Harris on Mormon Stories podcast to talk about during the
Matt Harris, who said in the middle of it, let's go check out and see what they said about the Trump-Russia connection in the middle of that podcast. In the middle of that podcast where you guys and most of the entirety of the left were hallucinating about a president and a Russia connection for 4 or 5 years. And it just came out this week that there was spying going on the Trump campaign from Hillary
There's
Clinton.
actual evidence on the table now.
Nobody's going to start mentioning that or talking about it, but
it's an insane conspiracy theory.
But Ezra Taft Benson was as crazy as QAnon. But the problem is what Ezra Taft Benson was talking about and warning about was that video that we just watched 20 years before it.
Exactly.
But Ezra Taft Benson was a crazy conspiracy theorist.
Kind of 60s and 70s, Ezra Taft Benson kind of years. And QAnon just falls right along with that. But the fact
you fall along that. You guys are the ones who get riled up into thinking your president is a Manchurian candidate.
Yeah.
The QAnon has kind of infected, Mormon wards and stakes throughout the Wasatch Front. It's a little bit of the chickens coming home to roost. Because
this, like with Biden, these guys really thought that Trump was in on stuff with Putin and all that sort of stuff. With me, with Biden, I think he's out to lunch and he's easily purchased. That's what I don't think he's ideological anything. you know.
No, yeah.
Because if the Mormon Church doesn't encourage critical thinking, if the Mormon Church doesn't encourage people to value evidence, if the Mormon Church kind of relies on emotion as a way to discern truth, then yeah, you're going to have a lot of people who are devoutly religious incorporate sympathies towards movements like QAnon into their worldview, and it's going to infect the church.
People who sometimes don't know how to decipher real types of data, analyze things, versus just go off of what feels best. And
like you guys, right?
Yeah, we have to protect the Mormon membership from misinformation.
Let me pull up some data to analyze. I don't think I can analyze it right. Can you help me analyze this? Because I don't have critical theory. I don't buy into critical theory, so I must not be a critical thinker. Democrats are more likely than Republicans to have heard of QAnon by a large margin too. Why is that? Because you guys get funneled this stuff through your media sources. Only about 50% of Republicans have heard of QAnon. This is kind of funny because I thought that could this be real? And just last night, a mutual friend of ours, whose dad, I know his dad actually gets into QAnon. He's the only QAnoner I know. He comes in and says, I just watched this documentary on this thing called QAnon. Have you heard of QAnon? And I was like, really? You just barely heard about that? Your dad's been talking to me about it for a year. Like, what are you talking about? But he's the only QAnoner that I know about.
QAnon.
But this guy, my friend, didn't even know about it until he came across it. Somebody sent him a documentary from the HBO that does it. How much have you heard about QAnon? This is people with degrees versus not degrees. 50% have even heard about it. Most of those, a very little bit. So I just like the Nassim Taleb thing we talked about yesterday, that very small minorities can do nutty things and get a lot of things happening. The QAnoners obviously have proven that point true too. If it's true of QAnoners, it's true of Blue-anoners, or true of social justice activists, that they can cause a lot of damage by only being that many. But my point is when John DeLynn or John Larson or any of you bozos ever talk about conservatism at all, you talk only about this right here. And anytime you talk about the conservative and the favorable views of it amongst those who have heard a lot about it, look at this once again, the ones who have heard a lot about it, only 25% of those have favorable views of it. Come on. The bigger issue to me, and the bigger deal with that, is that they want to claim that this is the same type of deal as like critical race theory, that all we've done is heard and done and seen about critical race theory. But we don't have institutions pushing QAnon inside the institutions everywhere we go. We don't have Netflix making QAnon, slipping in QAnon ideas in TV shows that we're watching.
No doubt.
And look at this, like 80 to 90% of the left wing has heard about and knows about QAnon. We have this thing here. QAnon is less well known in Trump world than it might be expected. Although it is generally thought of as far-right cult, it shows that Democrats are more aware of it than Republicans. This is true even after controlling for differences in education. Still, the minority of Republicans who are familiar with QAnon seem to be much more supportive of it than their Democratic counterparts. 30% of those Republicans say they view the online movement favorably. Come on, man. That's actually proven in this exact video, because later in this exact video, Kara says that her parents, who are super Trump supporters, don't know anything about QAnon. She's like, don't teach them about QAnon because they're Trump supporters. Well, you're just admitting right there they don't even know about it. They don't watch the crap you guys watch, which stuffs QAnon down your throats nonstop. Let's listen a little more of this.
And stick with that, and everything else be damned because they're playing Trump all. Nope.
It's kind of funny too, because they say like the non-literal church stuff is, wow, isn't that neat? When like the very day before they had transhuman Mormons on, that's not literal belief stuff. And you guys know right from that does not mean that they're not fully Mormon in some ways. They have different interpretations of it, but they're a ride or die with that Mormonism.
In some sense, religion can be viewed as a conspiracy theory. And so how different is QAnon from a set of religious beliefs, believing something you can't totally
from the church?
That's a deep thought, man.
But you can read the tea leaves and feel the spirit and know it's.
Postmodernism is a conspiracy theory. You can read and see the Marxism, the way it can predict the future, the way there's all these overarching hands of the movements of the they that control us and that make us all have to want capitalism.
true.
They manufacture our consent. They manufacture consent. We're all in a conspiracy theory. We're all saying that this stuff is being pushed down on high by bonkers with different interests.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I don't think I think people get into certain ideas that we all want the best for ourselves, our family, our countries, and we have disagreements about how.
That's the flip end of QAnon. I don't think you'll hit on it here, but there's always the points in QAnon that, it has crazy ideas like the stuff about there's tunnels under the earth and that Trump's going to come back and be come back victorious, and they're going to put all the Democrats
everybody's going to go to Gitmo.
Yeah. But the other concepts, like there's a cabal of pedophiles hiding things and watching out for each other. I hate to break it to you.
Yeah.
To best analyze the data of what actually will have that come to fruition. And so people who are in all of those different camps that we just explained, I truly believe, I was very conservative, grew up like in an anti-vax family. My parents have Trump painted on every car. Like I grew up in the most version of that. My parents had never heard of QAnon though, so don't tell me.
There you go. Guess what? Most conservatives have very different, very logical reasons why certain decisions the church is making them question, like, what are you guys doing? Like letting things like we just watched get into the BYU.
Rod Meldrum on Friday, like the Heartland theory, universal model, all of these things that are just not really based in evidence. I was raised in that, and I still have a love for these people, and I believe that they're genuine good people who are looking for how to, get.
The guy who I talked about, who is the full QAnon guy, is an awesome, nice, cool dude who would give his shirt off his back to anyone, any minority, anything.
About the truth, to try to better society, better people, that they think they have the answer. Unfortunately, I don't think that they do, but we all want to believe that people are doing the best with the information that they have, but they don't have nefarious motives.
Yeah. And we don't want Mormon Stories to be partisan, Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal politically. I believe there are good reasons to be in either party or in.
We just want everybody to be Marxist.
One side, but
What's that?
We just want everybody to be Marxist.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they, like I keep saying, I think they're kind of useful idiots. They don't even know like how they push the postmodern critical theory stuff, and it's being worked on them. I have half a hope that like if they'd ever read it or looked at it thoroughly throughout, that they maybe stop and think about it a little bit harder. But that's just half of an idea,
Want our Republican or conservative listeners to feel like our show is safe for them. So just that's to be as
right. You do. The conservatives are just
after I just called them all conspiracy theorists.
There's never, and that's been my complaint from the start. It's been the whole reason since the very first episode one. Every single time they describe what conservative ideas or people are, it's such a goof caricature that,
and then they backtrack.
We may have our personal biases, but we want you to feel comfortable on Mormon Stories podcast.
For sure.
Okay, a third slide that relates to conservatives, Kara, and this
we can't cut off the conservative donors.
Yeah, exactly. But there's some sort of level, like, so if you think they're all just QAnoners, Don, are you saying that you want QAnoners? Like,
going to be a little bit repetitive.
Even John Larson called you out for that.
But he's just really emphasizing and giving a little bit more detail.
All right, part 3. Personally, I think this poses a bigger threat to the church than the stuff we dealt with 10 years ago, church history issues, etc. I can't stress this enough. I think you'll see more talks about the organization of the church and how revelation flows through the first presidency, 1270, area presidencies, stake president, bishops, etc. Because some of these extremists think they're receiving coded messages from the general conference talks. The church will re-emphasize this isn't the way it works. Elder Christopherson gave a talk literally about this subject in a Utah area meeting that every ward in Utah watched for the 5th Sunday last week. You'll see more of this. Wow, that's so interesting.
So what's interesting about that?
They're saying that the QAnon stuff, because here's the thing. I know some QAnoners. I actually looked into it a long time ago before before it was even known what was up, and then I watched it. I have some loved ones that are into it, and they were sharing with me stuff. And when I saw that it wasn't coming to pass, I was like, "Don't you see the writing on the wall?" But these guys are saying that the QAnoners are like receiving coded messages within the churches, like within President Nelson's remarks.
That's what that guy's claiming.
I don't think that I've ever heard that at all. And I've heard nothing about that.
There's a thing that they're mixing up here, because they're saying right-wing cognitive dissonance is a threat to the decline in the church. But then every single thing they describe sounds to me like they're describing people being super zealous about the church. Like, what are you talking about? Like, if you were talking about the right-wing cognitive dissonance in the church, you'd be talking about what we've mentioned a couple times. You'd be saying these guys in the right wing, if they were thinking cognitive dissonance, are thinking that the church is falling into the left wing Great Reset mode. That would be the cognitive dissonance that would cause decline, that would cause them to leave the church. Everything you guys keep saying, you have a cognitive dissonance in it. You're saying that's church decline because they're super zealous about the church. That's a bad point. That makes no point. That doesn't make the point that you're trying to make.
I mean, QAnon is based on like coded messages. It's people being like, you know, like I was just trying to say, people who have a genuine love for the country and for like ending child sex trafficking and things that are obviously horrid atrocities that we don't want to see anymore of. And the way that we're going to stop them is through a coded message and not actually paying attention to the broader issue of how to actually get things done, I guess is a nice way to put it. Yeah. And so people who are already programmed to look for...
It's simpler than that. What it's simpler in is it's a complete loss of faith in institutions, but there are people who still kind of wish they have a hope in their desire.
Trying to find some hope in
some of those institutions somewhere have some plan, have something going on. So they're just people who haven't taken the black pill enough, like us.
Right.
They're trying to figure out whatever they could possibly imagine is the big plan behind this to make it okay. And the bigger worry you got to find out about is when they realize it's not okay and it's not going to be okay.
Like, oh, other people are not smart enough to get this message, but I got it. I've got the intel. And that's exactly how the people that I know that I just mentioned earlier, that's exactly how they think.
Those people are trying to rescue their belief in the institution. And if they weren't doing that, they'd lose all their faith in the institution.
They have a more supreme, in tune, spiritual intellect that can decode these messages more than just your average board member, that they've got it. So that falls right in line with everything.
Like the transhumanists, the Gnostics, the Hermetics, the people who think that they have a secret answer to the truth about stuff and how to get us there. Oh, who else is like that? Any sort of Hegelian Marxist. Mm-hmm. They think they've got the truth and they know how history is going to go and play out. Religious.
We just mentioned that whole camp along with general conference talks.
Yeah, and you made reference earlier to this idea that like the brethren are inspired and, you know, follow the prophet, unless they teach something we don't like the use of masks or, you know, the need to get vaccinated. And then we're all entitled to personal revelation to sort of, you know, diverge from the path that the prophets, seers, and revelators have given us. And basically what we're hearing here is that, you know, expect messages from the church telling us what the official formal channel of communication is, you know, personal revelation.
Yep.
You with your goofy little smile there, you think that their official message is going to be like, we received a doctrine and covenants that you must wear a mask.
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking, John Lynn? Because you're pretty sure that with your the Atlantic and New York Times reading list, which is all you ever get into, that masks still work, even though other places like CNN and all that have turned the corner on that, and the CDC. Mm-hmm. You think Russell M. Nelson's going to come out and make an official mask mandate and it's going to cause cognitive dissonance?
They never did make a mandate.
That's what I'm saying. I think Russell M. Nelson and that stuff have stuff to be concerned about, but they're not going to do stuff that stupid.
I mean, they shut down temples for a while. I guess I don't think they ever mandated it, but they encouraged people to wear masks. They encouraged to social distance. They did encourage the vaccines. Personally, okay, here I am going to fall into John Lynn's camp here, or what he's talking about. I didn't ever take that as doctrinal. So I
don't think they ever said it was doctrinal beyond the general concept of you got to follow the prophets.
Right.
Personal spirit, not so much. Look for it to come. Prophet, first presidency, quorum of the 12, general authorities, area authorities, down to stake leaders. It's kind of like when Joseph Smith was translating with the Peepstone.
I think there's some like twisted excitement he gets out of the Mormon church. He daydreams they push down the mandates that he wants them to push down.
The thing is, yeah, I don't.
And then he'll suddenly jump on their side that, oh, you got to follow the prophet because they're pushing a mandate that he wants.
See, this is the kind of perspective, though, that's like, I just don't get, because it's like, I understand, like, okay, if whether you're inside the church or if you decide to leave it or whatnot, but I've never felt like this was about like, hey, we got to control you guys. I don't know. I guess I've just always looked at, look, if you want to have a good life and you want to have, you know, to be free from problems, follow these commandments. But I don't know. I guess I just grew up, again, having grown up in kind of a colorful Mormon household, you know, I guess. I just always grew up being okay, being imperfect, always trying to strive for things, but to strive to be better. But I was just, I don't know, just the way that it just seems like so conspiracy theory directed that he has against everything with the church and the church leaders.
Yeah, and then he does the same thing too. Like he'll want, if they're saying something that he likes that they're saying, he'll suddenly say, "Follow that prophet, follow that prophet."
But you know, the church is always having to fight this tension of prophetic authority and personal revelation.
Yep.
It wants to hold both, but it's problematic. So
Yeah. So fascinating.
So follow the brethren. No. Follow the Spirit as long as it tells you to follow the brethren. If the Spirit tells you not to follow the brethren, then follow.
John Lynn, don't follow the brethren unless they do something that I like. Then follow the brethren.
Follow the brethren. So basically, I always follow the brethren.
Yeah. And if I can, is this true? Do you know this for a fact? I'm going off of something that somebody told me at the Book of Mormon Evidence Conference. So I'm going to hold that with a little distance, that the church has stock in like big pharma stocks.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think a lot of the conspiracies are led to that Russell Nelson is going to be doing and saying things because he's trying to, stay in line with the corporate narrative of what big pharma would want him to do. So there's going to be certain areas that they can discount. And then other areas, like not accepting their gay family and friends, they're right on point with Russell on that.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's fun.
It's fun. Okay, so that's the conservative schism that's happening within Mormonism. Because obviously church attendance is down. We're going to be talking about that in just a second. But let's move on to what he's calling COVID apathy. Take it away, Kara.
I hope I can read all these words.
I'm sure
which
you
is a
can
high
imagine
demand.
what that is.
So church attendance is down. It has nothing to do with COVID. It's just, this is a writing on the wall. The church is in decline.
Yeah. It's just more percentages on people attending or not.
Church attendance dropped 59% in 2020. People are fleeing the church.
So another really interesting piece of intel is that a new temple prep course is coming out with video of the actual endowment sessions, temple clothing being worn, etc. And we have David Bednar to thank. So I mean, I think this is kind of significant. Now I don't know if we thank, prophets, seers, and revelators and David Bednar for making this happen. Maybe in part this is revelation, but I think we also have to give a shout out to anyone who's ever published the temple ceremony on the internet.
That's the guy who's calling them out. That new name Noah guy.
Yeah.
The guy who's calling them out for, at some point in this, early on in it, they said, we have this guy who's giving us this information. It's like Deep Throat, referring to the Watergate scandal. And John stops and goes, "No, I'm not talking about anything sexual, Carol. You stop thinking of sexual stuff. Get that out of your mind." And that new name I just thought of that new name guy probably making like 5 TikToks out of that. Like, how dare you shouldn't be talking sexually like that to a girl in front of people. They know, like, look at her face right there. She knows that she knows they're referring to they're saying thanks to the guy who,
or, TikTokers, I guess, that now habitually are making TikToks in their temple garb.
Dude, yeah.
But I think the church has realized, we can't be the Masonic Lodge anymore. We can't keep these secret oaths and handshakes and temple clothing secret anymore. And maybe, Kara, maybe they've been listening to us about informed consent, that people actually deserve to know what they're going to be doing and wearing and promising and covenanting to and doing. And so maybe we should train them and let them know ahead of time.
Yeah.
I've heard like some things like about the church is like growing substantially outside of the US. So if there's any like attrition coming within the US, from what I understand, it's growing like crazy, like outside, but I don't know. That's what I've heard.
well, that even all that was just anecdotal stuff from some guy at some ward somewhere. They even say at the beginning that it's anecdotal stuff. There's no like super hard numbers on any of that. But this is something that I referred to when I was on with the Midnight Mormons, and it's just an obvious point. It should just be generally an obvious point. Everybody should know about it, but it's kind of one of the concepts, the Darwinistic concepts of religions do better to gel groups and communities together.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Mormons out there leading the front of stuff. If this right here, if this is below 2, the bottom line of it is you're already on a path that 80 years from now, you're already over. It's already
right. Yeah.
If Mormons keep this going or keep this up and keep doing this beyond all the other sorts of stuff, and he mentioned at the beginning that even like all their monies and the professions and the people they have doing it, as long as they just don't start using that money to start kowtowing to the neoliberal pressures that they're getting, Mormon church is fine.
Darwin was a Mormon.
I feel like this took all my spirits out of me. Everything has lately, and I had to, we did a long episode with Jonathan Streeter on Sunday for hours. We talked about postmodernism, and I've read a lot of it over the years. And every time I get back into reading it and read more and read more and read more and read more, I get just all over again irritated and upset and bothered with it. The more I read it, the more it just frazzles me. But
you just need to join the Church of Sam Harris so you can find that meaning in the nothingness of your life.
Yeah, well, that was the other subject that we were going to talk about, but
I'm just foreshadowing the next step.
I got a light note to end off with, but let me share this first. Actually, let me do it. I'm going to do that again on one that doesn't show my whole screen there. That's better. Yeah, that was me the past couple weeks.
Yeah.
But I'm always reading and listening to those guys anyway, because I'm just kind of constantly refining it. And as I've stated before, I think there's ideas in the postmodernists that would be really interesting to keep, like in the art world or in the world of like contemplating things on certain levels, putting the lens on for a little bit, thinking about some ideas. But I think in the pragmatic world, it falls apart really quickly. So let me just end off with a happy dappy. We started with Muppets last time. I'm going to end with a Muppets thing. Jim Henson. The last thing he said on Fraggle Rock when he made a guest appearance. Fraggle Rock, a show that he devised, saying that he wanted to create a show that was going to end war. And why did he feel that show would end war? Is because he showed societies, things like the Fraggles and the Doozers who work all day and the Fraggles who play all day, figuring out how to live together and being really understanding what each other one is across time. I think it's the last thing he said on his last appearance on Fraggle Rock. He died not much longer after Fraggle Rock ended.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he died pretty quick. I mean, it was like early 90s. It might have killed him too, because he was doing too many different things at once. He was flying around to too many different places, got pneumonia and died. I think it was COVID related. So Jim Henson played this mystic character. He didn't play a ton of characters because Fraggle Rock was one of the first shows that he kind of gave off to some of his other puppeteers to keep him busy. And he left it in their hands a lot, but he'd come make guest appearances on it and do all that sorts of stuff and oversee some things and direct a few episodes.
It's not important now.
Everything is important. Either that or nothing is. I prefer the former.
Yeah. So
I like the Church of Jim Henson.
Yeah. All right. Any last things to say?
No. That's
it.
it.
All right. Adios.
Peace.